Hello and welcome to Cadwell Park for the first race in the 2020 BRSCC ClubSport Trophy. Now, the ClubSport Trophy is open to all kinds of race cars and it's separated into different classes. We see cars from various well-established BRSCC series such as the MX-5 Championship and MX-5 Super Cup and the BMW Compact Cup. We've also got some cars from the newly created BRSCC CityCar Cup. They're going to be exciting to watch out on track, plus some not so usual cars that we see in racing these days, including a Mark III Capri and some various specials based on other road cars. There's Fiesta ST that's from the Track Day Trophy, for example. This is going to be great racing. You're going to enjoy it. Sit back, watch, enjoy, and listen to Andy McEwan.
Yeah, thanks Lloyd. Really looking forward to this then, the first round of the season for the BRSCC ClubSport Trophy, and as ever it's an eclectic mix of cars that is assembling some 38 starters. We're hoping for the 45-minute race here this afternoon. Cars then lining up on the grid. Let's take a look, shall we, at how that grid will line up, and it's a busy one. Chrissy Palmer and Brian Chandler make up row one ahead of David Sheed and Declan Lee, then David May and Ollie Samways, many familiar BRSCC names there. Adrian Burgess, Porsche Boxster is next ahead of Paul Sheard. Cameron McLean and Andy Thompson are on the fifth row, then Scott Ferguson and Alex Boehm on row 6. Darren Stapleton is next alongside Alex Miller, then Adam Reed and Robert Greensmith. Phil Adcock 17th on the grid ahead of Kevin Bird, whilst Christian White and Mark Thomas round out the top 20. They're ahead of Craig Butterworth and Richard Bartlett, Craig Robertson and David Thomas on row 12. Nick Grindrod and Richard Brunning are next. We're still only just past halfway through the grid. Then we start getting into some of these city cars, so the Citroen C1s, the Peugeots. I'll talk about that in more detail as we get into the race, but great to see already several drivers have got themselves behind the wheel of the CityCar Cup cars, and that is hoping to become a series in its own right in the very near future. They're a perfect addition, though, to this BRSCC ClubSport Trophy grid, which is about to burst off the line into turn number 1 for 45 minutes of action here at Cadwell Park. Away they go. It's the Mazda MX-5 and the Lotus Exige on the front row, and it's the Lotus that grabs the early advantage. Slow start there from Declan Lee from the second row, and bursting around the outside, Ollie Samways in that very rapid Toyota MR2 Super GT car. He was a little further down the grid than you might have expected. He's already making up for that, though, into 4th place through turns 1 and 2. Chrissy Palmer from the front row was not away that well, so he's dropped down the order slightly as we ride on board with Alex McLean now. Alex McLean, who started down in 10th in his Renault Clio 182. He's got one of the Ford Fiestas just ahead of him there. I think that's Alex Boehm, who started actually behind him on the grid. Already, the battle is on at the front of the field, though. It's Brian Chandler that leads the way. Coming around the outside there, I think that was David Sheed in the BMW Compact trying to get the lead away, as this hugely varied field makes its way around Park Corner for the first time. Thankfully, it is a clean start. Everyone through the first set of corners in one piece, and the man out in front, Brian Chandler, we are more accustomed to seeing behind the wheel of Mazda MX-5s, both Mark 1s and Mark 3s, but this time he is in that very rapid Lotus. Alex McLean here still dicing away with the Ford Fiesta in front. There are several different classes of car out there, classes A, B, C, D and E within the ClubSport Trophy, and then the CityCar Cup making up its own part of the grid. As up through the hall bends we go for the first time, and into 3rd place now then comes this Toyota of Ollie Samways, car 111 there. He's got himself ahead of the pole sitter Chrissy Palmer, though, who throws it back up the inside into the hairpin and reclaims 3rd place. Aggressive stuff there from Chrissy, who has lots of rallycross experience. He's got good car control, and a very rapid racer is Chrissy Palmer, but that MX-5 is not going to be as quick as the Toyota in a straight line, you'd imagine, so Ollie Samways may be able to come back at him here as they cross the start-finish line. That's exactly what happens. He goes to the outside line and motors alongside the MX-5 and carries good speed into Coppice Corner to reclaim 3rd place. Third back, some good battling going on. The Ford Capri there diving up the inside line. I told you we had variety on the grid this weekend for the ClubSport Trophy. The Ford Capri is being driven by Mark Thomas, running in Class A, so he's up against, in theory, the same kind of cars as we're seeing at the front of the field. Brian Chandler is in Class A, Ollie Samways, Adrian Burgess, Porsche Boxster as well, but the Capri a little bit older than some of those cars, and therefore a little bit further down the field. 3rd place then makes its way up through the right-hander at Park Corner, and it's now a 3-way fight because David May in the 118 BMW 330 has closed in. David, another regular in the BRSCC's hugely popular Compact Cup, but racing a different kind of BMW this weekend. We ride on board now then with Alex Miller, who is a regular name in the BRSCC's equally successful Mazda MX-5 Championship, or Mazda MX-5 Super Cup actually, for the Mark III cars, racing his regular machine here this weekend, along with several other competitors who are itching to get back out on track now after this delayed start to the season has limited their amount of testing. This is a great way to go out there, do some testing, and get a good race under your belt as well. And a good race is what we've got on our hands here for third place, as Chrissy Palmer tries in vain for the time being to reclaim this third place from the Toyota. He goes back up the inside into the hairpin. This is the move he made a lap ago, and he retakes third place. Fantastic stuff, but Ollie Samways knows that if he can just stay on the tail of the MX-5 through the final corner at Barn, he should be able to motor back past on the pit straight. Oh, Alex Miller there, very sideways out of the hairpin. And here we go again. We've seen this movie before, haven't we? Ollie Samways pulls out, mirror signal manoeuvre, retakes third position. These two would leave each other alone. They could even catch, potentially, the BMW up the road. But, oh, Samways has lost it from third place. And, well, that was brilliant avoidance there from Chrissy Palmer to avoid T-boning Toyota. But Ollie Samways, having worked hard to get back into that third place, has thrown it away, going up through Charlie's, a very easy corner to lose control at. And lose control he did in spectacular fashion. He has avoided the barriers, thankfully, and will rejoin, but a lot further down now than he was earlier on. Well, that is a shame for Ollie Samways then, who drops out of podium contention. The good news is this is a long race though, 45 minutes, so he has got time to regain some of that lost ground, but the podium might be asking a little bit much now. Right, we're with Alex Miller as we go through the gooseneck once again in the Mazda MX-5, a very well turned out car this is, and right ahead of him is that battle that we were watching earlier on as the Renault Clio of Cameron McLean continues to try and scrap its way ahead of Alex Boehm's Ford Fiesta. Alex was the highest placed of the Fiestas on the grid. In fact, it might even be the only Fiesta on the grid this weekend, which is rare, but the Clubsport Trophy does attract lots of different drivers and cars each time, and Alex Miller is in the barriers, I'm afraid, coming over the top of the mountain. And here is the external replay. Got a wheel on the grass as he came over the hill, lost the rear of the MX-5, and it's not too substantial an impact with the barriers, thankfully, but that was a scary moment at a scary enough piece of track already for Alex, who should be able to carry on, and indeed he does. But another driver then caught out by this super challenging circuit. Phil Adcock, one of the cars there that makes his way past Alex, who's now got a couple of Mark I MX-5s to dice with just up the road, and Phil Adcock in the MX-5 sandwich there in his bright yellow BMW Compact Cup car. And Phil qualified quite well, actually, 18th place, which was not bad at all, considering the compact Cup car is not the fastest of cars out there. It runs in Class E, which is the lowest of the Clubsport Trophy classes, performance-wise. Good competition in Class E against some of the Mark I MX-5s, for example, with which he's dicing. Speaking of dicing, car number 4 here, trying to work its way through, is Paul Sheard. Now, Paul Sheard was the winner of the first ever Clubsport Trophy race at Brands Hatch last year. And he and Aidan Hills won in just about the most dramatic of circumstances on the very final corner of the final lap, working their way past Bruce Winfield's Honda Civic to claim the victory. There was then another race at Donington Park at the end of last year, which Bruce was able to win ahead of Ben Sharp and Paul Taylor in a Honda Civic 123. And on that occasion, the highest place of the MX-5s was Darren Stapleton's example in 5th place. But as I was starting to say before Alex Miller threw himself at the scenery, the Clubsport Trophy, because it's a series rather than a championship at the moment, it attracts different drivers and different cars each time. So if you're local to the given circuit that the Clubsport Trophy is racing at, you can jump in for one race, or you can do a handful of them if they're circuits that you want to test out for later in the year, for example. Many teams and drivers also choosing to stick around and do most of the Clubsport Trophy races, which is nice to see. So back on board then as we head through the far end of the circuit there with Alex Boehm in that, not Alex Boehm, with Cameron McLean chasing Alex Boehm. It's the Clio still stuck behind the Fiesta, and they are racing here, as I said, with Paul Sheard in the MX-5, and then the little Seat just in front of them, Andy Thompson's 1.8 litre turbocharged Seat Leon Super Cup car. And he pulls away in a straight line, but around the tight technical sections, Paul Sheard's lightweight MX-5, with which he is very familiar. Paul Sheard, of course, not only a successful MX-5 racer, but also team owner and runner of cars in various MX-5 competitions. He's able to close back in again on the slightly more powerful car through the corners, but then Bohm in the Fiesta has more grunt in a straight line, pulls to the outside of Paul Sheard, who's going to have to be quite brave on the brakes now to get back up the inside into Park Corner. Can he do it? No, the Fiesta goes through. So finally we see a change of position in this group then that has been very close but fairly static up until this point, and Alex Bohm having started 13th, while Paul Sheard started 8th, 5 places ahead of him, so that gives you an idea of the rate of progress that the Fiesta has made. And now in true Clubsport Trophy fashion, he's got another completely different car to try and chase down in the shape of the Seat in front, and then just in front of them is the Porsche Boxster of Adrian Burge. So he is a little bit ahead of this group in fairness, so it might take Bohm a little while to get onto terms with him, but he certainly looks racy here, getting back away from Paul Sheard as they accelerate towards the mountain section once more. Paul now has the Renault Clio 182 behind of Cameron McLean. Now, Cameron McLean and Paul Sheard are both in the same class, as indeed is Alex Bohm. These are all Class C cars here racing together. The Seat, though, of Andy Thompson is running in Class B, but because you don't score points in this, because it's not a championship, you kind of just race whoever you find on the track, but the drivers, I'm sure, will be looking to try and win their own individual classes. The top 3 places on the grid, actually, though, were filled by cars from 3 different classes. Chrissy Palmer's MX-5 that was on pole is a Class C car, Brian Chandler's Lotus runs in a Class A, and David Sheed's BMW in Class B, and we see a change there between Class C cars as through goes Alex McLean. So having seen Alex Bohm go through, Cameron McLean, excuse me, was able to follow him through, and now sets back off in pursuit after the Ford Fiesta, which looked a bit wayward there through the middle of Charlie's corner, that tricky double apex right-hander that we saw catch out Ollie Samways earlier on in his Class A Toyota MR2. So up into the top end of the circuit, and already they are starting to negotiate some of the lap traffic. I think that's Paul Toolan's Peugeot 107 that they're getting past, running in the CityCar Cup. And there you can see another one, in fact some of the leading contenders now in the CityCar Cup coming through the Hall Bends, and that is car number 100, which is Steve Laidlaw's Peugeot 107. Toyota Aygo chasing him down, and I think that's the overall race leader coming up behind, as you can see the difficulty they're having in traffic now. Battle for second place here, so Chrissy Palmer, who in qualifying was only a tenth and a half quicker than Brian Chandler's Lotus, but didn't get off the line quite as well, and had fallen down towards the back end of the top 5 at one point. He's back on the tail now, though, of the BMW Compact of David Sheed. Now, this is a BMW Compact, but not running to quite the same specification as those that run in the Compact Cup, and therefore those that run in Class E of the Clubsport Trophy. You can see that car of David Sheed has quite a bit more horsepower. Also has sprouted a rear wing, which he hopes is giving him a bit more rear downforce, but in a straight line, it definitely has the edge over the little Mazda. But you can see the way that Chrissy Palmer closes in through Charlie's corner. They've got the Aygo in front of them to try and negotiate, which they do, but only just. That was number 23, Tim Evans, in the Toyota Aygo. And then they close in on the little Peugeot number 100 of Steve Laidlaw and find a way through. CityCar Cup new for 2020, and it is a race series featuring 1 litre 3-door models of the Toyota Aygo, the Peugeot 107, and of course the very popular Citroen C1, because all of those cars, despite having different body kits and different badges, are essentially the same underneath, and so it's a new series that the BRSCC is trialling out, and so far looks to have garnered plenty of interest, which is nice to see. Phil Adcock here often is in the middle of an entertaining scrap, not usually with a Mazda MX-5, it must be said, but he will race anyone, will Phil, and it's the 122 of Robert Greensmith that he's trying to keep behind him for the time being, actually. One of the fascinations of the Clubsport Trophy is seeing these cars that traditionally would race in one-make championships pitted against each other and seeing where the various advantages are. So the BMW may be a bit more powerful, but the MX-5 definitely more nimble and agile through the corners. And so Robert Greensmith, who I'm going to assume is a relation of Johnny Greensmith, very successful MX-5 racing, in fact a former champion in one-make MX-5 racing was Johnny Greensmith. They are his colours, and I'm pretty sure that's his old Mark 1 that Robert is driving at the moment. Down through Mansfield, tries to get up the inside of Phil Adcock there, coming out of the left-hander, but Phil is wise to that one, covers it off and hangs on to the position. Behind them, another gaggle. Wherever you look, you've got battling going on. We've got a Toyota MR2 here, a Renault Clio, a MX-5 and a Mini all racing together. The Mini, I think, is Christian White's number 55 example at the back of that little queue. That's the Greensmith and Phil Adcock scrap resumes at the Hall Bends. Can Greensmith get up the inside of Phil? Not a chance. He covers the inside line nicely there. Both of these cars running in Class E. In fact, they were second and third on the grid in Class E. Greensmith ahead of Adcock by about half a second, so Phil's done well to find a way past the MX-5 in the early stages. And now he's having to work hard to keep it behind. There is Christian White in the 55 Mini coming through, and it's the Mark 1 Toyota MR2 of David Thomas that heads this scrap. Number 28, the red machine. Right behind him in the Renault Clio, I think that is Craig Butterworth. Yes, it is. We ride on board with Butterworth. And he throws the front-wheel drive car into park corner. The rear just a bit twitchy there. The short wheelbase front-wheel drive Clio can be a bit lively at the rear. Craig's got a circuit map there stuck to the dash just in case he forgets where he's racing. And although, all joking aside, is a circuit that many drivers don't get as many opportunities to drive at as they might like. So, because it is such a tricky circuit and a very busy circuit too, you don't really get any chance to relax around here. Maybe that circuit map might come in handy. There's the leader then, Brian Chandler, absolutely storming away here at the front of the field. There's the gap back to second place, which is still David Sheed in the number 13 BMW, with Chrissy Palmer having caught him now, just not able to find a way past. Chandler's Lotus looks on rails though as it heads up through the top end of the circuit. Brian's had success here before in, as I said, one make MX-5 racing predominantly. A strange line there being taken out of the final corner by David Thomas as he tries to keep the Class C Toyota MR2 ahead of the Renault Clio behind him of Craig Butterworth, who runs in Class D. And there, look, the overall race leader, Brian Chandler, about to come up and lap this group. Now, he's got a big lead, doesn't really need to take too many risks here. You've got cars on 3 different laps, essentially, here as well, because the leader is not only putting this group of cars 1 lap down, but they've caught the back of the CityCar Cup class again pretty quickly. Those cars, of course, are not as quick as many of the others racing in the series, but in a race of their own. Leading CityCar Cup car on the grid was Nick Grindrod's Citroen C1, and Richard Brunning was second quickest, albeit nearly 2 seconds behind him, so Grindrod definitely the favourite for the CityCar Cup element of the race. As the pit lane window has now opened, all of these cars have to make their way into the pit lane at some point during this pit window now, so this is where things definitely start to get a bit shuffled around. As we wait and see who is going to dive in when. Butterworth here doing his best to stay out of the way of the leader, which he does. I'm sure I saw Brian Chandler waving out of the window there. So relaxed is he behind the wheel of the race-leading Lotus Exige. Into the left-hand element of the mountain. What position time for Chrissy Palmer, of course, was 141.178. So it'd be interesting to see whether we get down to those sort of lap times. I think Brian Chandler, actually, yeah, he's down into the 1 minute 40s already, so he is really flying around this Cadwell Park circuit in Lincolnshire. Real roller coaster ride. Not the easiest place to overtake at though, just because it's so narrow and so many of the big braking points come at the end of very challenging sections of circuit. You've got to really be committed through the windy stuff. The race leader is in meanwhile, so too I think. Yes, comes the Toyota MR2, so that will free up this group. David Thomas vacates the track, heads into the pit lane, and frees up Craig Butterworth now in the Class D Renault Clio, who out-qualified David by a couple of places, but obviously fell behind the rear-wheel drive car off the standing start, and was never really able to get that through. Crucial now then for Butterworth to put his foot down and try to set some really quick lap times now. Use the clean air to his advantage. He should, in theory, be able to go a lot quicker now that the MR2 isn't holding him up, which certainly seemed to be the case, especially through the second half of that tighter, more technical mountain section. But he also got to watch his mirrors, because there is Chrissy Palmer coming through now. There is no sign there of David Sheed, so I think David Sheed has pitted from second place, so Chrissy Palmer now leads the way, but he has not yet brought that Mark IV MX-5 into the pit lane. Craig Butterworth there moves to the left to let the leader through, and you can see the problem here. He gets on the dirty side of the road, and that's a very busy part of the circuit. That corner, the right-hander at Chris Curve, suddenly tightens up into the entrance to the gooseneck. You've got to go down a gear, you've got to turn right over a blind crest, and he's on the dirty side of the road trying not to take the leader out. A very busy moment there for Craig Butterworth, who thankfully manages to avoid making contact with the leader. The pit lane, a busy place right now then, as the Ford Capri there gets wheeled back after its pit stop. Also in look Alex Miller, possibly to have a look at the damage sustained in that earlier incident at the top of the mountain. On board with Alex now as he pulls out of the pit lane, goes essentially back onto the lead lap there, ahead of Brian Chandler, who we imagine will reclaim the race lead once the pit stop sequence is over. Bit of an adjustment of the rear mirror there, which I'm sure got dislodged in the impact with the barrier. And I said it was a fairly gentle collision with the Arco for Miller, but from within the car I'm sure it felt quite a bit more substantial. Now, Phil Adcock still keeping Robert Greensmith at bay, and they've now got the Capri of Mark Thomas right in front of them. Out goes Brian Chandler, so Brian Chandler back on underway. He will of course have lost the race lead, but when everyone else pits, I don't imagine that they're going to be able to leapfrog the Lotus, which definitely seems to have had the pace advantage today. Very wide there coming out of Charlie's for Richard Bartlett in the Mark 1 MX-5. Just ahead of them looked to be Christian White. Yeah, Christian White there, the 55 car, has definitely gained a bit of ground there. He's gained a couple of places. Paul Sheard there races across the start-finish line as Alex Miller is about to negotiate some more of the city cars. It's like a couple of Peugeots dicing away here. Car number 10, the first one to find a way past. That's Elliot Luthwaite. And the other one, I think I caught the number, was Simon, no, it must have been Paul Toolan in the 107. As this terrific scrap continues, it is for position within class, as I said earlier on. And Phil Adcock racing for a podium here, which I'm sure he'll be very eager to bring home. Here comes that scrap. In fact, it was, yes, it was the 71 car, excuse me, of Simon Toolan. I said the Citroens and the Peugeots all look pretty similar because they are built on the same chassis with the same running gear and same engine. Easy to mix them up sometimes. It is a Citroen C1 then just ahead of the Peugeot as Chrissy Palmer gets really balked there by Alex Miller, who was lapping one of the Citroens, and the Mark III MX-5 now gets lapped by the race-leading Mark IV MX-5, which is in no hurry to head into the pit lane, I notice here. So Chrissy Palmer maybe just hoping that Brian Chandler will get held up in traffic now that he's stopped. You can see there's a bit of damage to the front of that red MX-5 too, so Chrissy has had contact with someone or something. But with so many cars on such a narrow, tight circuit, it's not a huge surprise, I suppose, that there's been a bit of paint traded. Side-by-side battle there up the hill, and change of position there, I think, within the CityCar Cup. That is the 91 car losing out, Liam Browning. And going past him there, didn't quite catch the number. I think it was Clive Brookson in the Citroen C1. Clive, another familiar face amongst BRSCC paddocks. Adam Reed now we're on board with, car number 7, turning through the right-hander. This is another one of the BMW Compacts running in Class E, and he is heading for the pit lane now, Adam Reed. He was the highest qualified of the Class E cars. I think he'd retained the Class E lead up to this point as well, so if he doesn't have a good pit stop here, then Robert Greensmith and Phil Adcock, who are still the other way round, actually, Adcock ahead of Greensmith, could close in. It's like trying to find a parking space outside your local supermarket, isn't it? This down in the pit lane. You can't fit 38 cars in the pit lane at the same time here at Cadwell Park. They don't have any pit garages either at this circuit, and so it's you've got to time it right and try and pit when nobody else is, ideally. So you've always got a bit of clear space, and Brian Chandler goes off at the hairpin. Now, that was an uncharacteristic mistake, and that even more so as he tries to gas it up and rejoin. He's almost collected there by Clive Brookson's CityCar Cup C1, and Brian Chandler made a real mess of the hairpin that time. Now remember, this car pitted from the race lead, and that will have lost him a good 10 seconds or so, and all of a sudden Chrissy Palmer could actually be in contention to take the lead away now after the pit stop. So real drama there for Chandler. More drama here for Craig Butterworth as well, who can't seem to get out of the pit lane. I was going to say he couldn't get the car fired up. I think he was just being extra cautious not to... There is a minimum pit lane time that they have to spend in the pits. He was being careful not to be under that, and I think also was making sure that the fast lane and the pit lane was clear. Which it was, but something worse than making contact in the pit lane. It's a very dangerous place to be making contact, so I suppose rightfully so. He was taking it easy. He's rejoined the track now, though, and it'll be interesting to see where he comes out once all of this shakes out with those that he was racing. Oh, sideways Paul Sheard as he tries desperately to close in on the Alex Boehm Ford Fiesta. And there is another Mark III MX-5 in that group as well, which I think might well be for position. As we wait now, Adam Reed then comes out of the pit lane, car number 7, so the BMW pitted from the Class E lead. It's making its way back into the fray now. Pit lane's a lot quieter now, which again might well suit someone like Chrissy Palmer when he eventually decides to dive for the pit lane. Very quickly accelerating up speed. You can see just how narrow the circuit is. You get real tunnel vision there, don't you? Accelerating up towards Coppice Corner, the first left-hander, then on board into Charlie's, just touches the curb. It's a bit wide. Down a gear into the second part of Charlie's. Great views there. Oh, dear me. And this is all getting quite tight, isn't it? As the race leader, Chrissy Palmer, comes up to lap the Ford Capri, which pulls away from him in a straight line, but then has to brake and corner a lot slower than the number 99 car, which you can see is running under the Sheard banner, so Paul Sheard's team clearly branching into the Mark IV MX-5s now as well, which have yet to make their debut with the BRSCC's one-make MX-5 championships, but good to see one here in the Clubsport Trophy, although it nearly ended up in a bit of strife there as it almost tangled with the Capri, putting a lap on it. This is getting tight across the line as well, and this is all for position, remember. Craig Butterworth there in the Renault Clio, just about finding it. Sorry, Cameron McLean, excuse me, the blue Clio, goes past Craig Butterworth in the red Clio, who is a lap behind them, I think, but, well, McLean was not for slowing down there, despite the fact there were cars coming out of the pit lane right in front of him. One of those cars was the Mark 1 MR2 of David Thomas, who, of course, was racing earlier on with Craig Butterworth in the Clio. So I think Craig has actually got out in front of the Toyota. We're on board with Craig now. The Toyota, I think, is behind us. So it's one place gain. The Suzuki there just in front, getting a bit tangled up as they tried to go up the inside. And that is Craig Robertson in the Suzuki Swift Mark II, 60-valve GTI engine powering the yellow and blue Suzuki Swift, which is the only one of its kind on the track in this particular race, and they're a bit of a dying breed anyway. Into the pit lane there comes one of the Citroens, as across the start-finish line goes David May there, who we haven't seen much of, the black BMW. Now that is Phil Adcock leaving the pit lane. Now has he blinked before Robert Greensmith? I think he has, but it'll be interesting to see where he comes out in relation to Adam Reed's BMW compact that was leading the class. Well, there's no one else in sight, so I'm going to assume that Adcock has dropped back in behind the other compact. He now at least has the track to himself, just the way he likes it, I'm sure. And no one else to distract him and get in his way. He can put his foot down and try to hopefully build a bit more of a lead over Robert Greensmith than he had before the pit window started. There is David May. Brian Chandler coming through, about to, I think, unlap himself. I don't think David May has pitted yet in the black BMW. Chandler is really pushing here, though, isn't he? You wouldn't think that this was a man who'd built up a near enough 10-second cushion before the pit stops. There, sliding his way through the mountain, the part of the circuit that caught him out earlier on. In true racing driver fashion, though, he has been able to overcome that. He's still driving pretty hard through that sequence of corners, through the Hall Bends, then into the hairpin, one of the compacts just in front, about to go a lap down, and that is the number 7 of Adam Reed. So that is Reed, who we saw pitting earlier on. And whereabouts might Phil Adcock be? He is about to come through, I think, isn't he? He's just behind that group, so there's still a decent lead there for Adam Reed. After the top 2 in Class E have both made their pit stops. So Brian Chandler back out of the final corner, crosses the start-finish line. And there, look, was Chrissy Palmer coming out of the pit lane. So that was for the race lead, essentially, once everyone has stopped. Brian Chandler will still be ahead of Chrissy Palmer, but not by the sort of margin that he was earlier on. There went Chandler, and wait for it. Well, it's still a pretty healthy margin back to the red MX-5, isn't it? So Chandler, despite the mistake that he made at the hairpin, has worked hard to make up for lost time. He goes back up the inside of David May's BMW now. As I said, he's yet to make its mandatory pit stop. Hits the brakes into Park Corner. Brian Chandler, I'm not sure whether he will have seen Chrissy Palmer coming out of the pit lane there, because I think he might have just cleared the pit exit before Chrissy's red MX-5 nosed its way back out onto the track. But if he did see it, he'll have breathed a bit of a sigh of relief, I'm sure, Brian, knowing that he's still in front of his nearest rival. So out of the final corner comes the Class E leader there, look, and the overall race leader continuing to work his way through traffic now. Brian Chandler continuing to build up this nice healthy cushion over Chrissy Palmer. You can see the gap now, it's about half the length of the start-finish straight, separating the Lotus Exige of Chandler and the Mark IV Mazda MX-5 of Chrissy Palmer. I think he's making his first Clubsport Trophy appearance. Brian Chandler, I seem to recall seeing him out in the Clubsport Trophy at one time or another last year. Although actually I may be wrong in that, I'm just scanning down through the results from the previous 2 races. No, I don't see his name on there actually, so Brian Chandler, as I say, we're just so used to seeing him at BRSCC race meetings in one role or another. And of course Brian Chandler also runs cars in Mazda MX-5 racing and other series, and branching out now to the slightly more powerful Lotus, which is pedalling very, very well here at Cadwell. Looks like an absolute dream to drive around this place. It's got the horsepower, but it's also got the handling capabilities. David May there coming through, not in second place as it would at first appear, because like I say, I'm pretty sure he still owes us a pit stop. So Chrissy Palmer should still be second place. The other driver I'm keen to catch a glimpse of, if possible, is Ollie Samways in that Treble 1 Toyota MR2, because he was running in third place when he had that spin. We know he's got podium potential. Once this all shakes out, I would be fascinated to see whether or not he's been able to work his way back into the top 5 at least. I think that should be doable. Maybe he still could get a podium, especially if 1 or 2 drop by the wayside before the end of the race. David May then turns through the final corner, accelerates back away. Chrissy Palmer about to put a lap on the Class C BMW. These two are actually running in the same class, and along with Declan Lee, were expected to be fighting for the class victory. Right, pit lane window is closed now, so in theory all of the pit stops should have been done. We should now get a good idea of precisely what the order is. There goes Chandler waving at Alex Miller as he races through. Heads back up towards the top end of the circuit, and a very busy racetrack greets him as well, as the cars on multiple different laps just in front of him there try their best to stay out of his way. Alex Miller here trying to follow Chandler through, and that was nicely done. That was Craig Butterworth that he went round the outside of there, and Alex Miller had to really thread the eye of the needle there. Tries to follow the Lotus through the gooseneck. That can be quite tricky though, actually. If you get lapped by somebody and then you're following them through a sequence of corners, it's easy to, especially for someone like Alex who has more experience in one-make racing, it's very easy to try and follow the line and the speed and the braking points of the faster car that just lapped you. And of course, if your car's not capable of doing that, you're very soon going to find yourself off the road. But he's actually keeping up quite well through this sequence with the Lotus Exige. And why shouldn't he? Because the Mark III MX-5 is a very, very rapid piece of kit, so it ought to be capable, certainly through the technical stuff, of keeping up with Chandler. And now as Chandler gets held up a little bit here by the Ford Capri of Mark Thomas, so the gap actually comes back down again. Now Mark Thomas is running in Class A, which is the same class as Brian Chandler, and you might think, well, how does that work? The Lotus is surely quicker than the Capri. Well, look at the power the Ford has got. There may be about 30 odd years age difference between those two cars, but the Lotus has not got any more horsepower than the Capri. It's just capable of putting it down a bit better coming out of the corners, so the Ford now starts to slip backwards. But certainly when it comes to sort of power to weight ratios and whatnot, which is how the class system is worked out, the Ford Capri is every bit the match for the other cars in its class. And then here you've got 2 Class C cars that again are fairly evenly matched. Chrissy Palmer having much the same problem with David May here, who I think reckons he's racing for position here with Chrissy Palmer. Chrissy Palmer goes up the inside. Now, I don't think they're fighting for position, although I'm prepared to be wrong on that actually, because David May did qualify pretty well in that 118 car, but either way, the MX-5 does eventually go through. The number 99 machine works its way now to second on the road. Whether that was for position or not, I'm not too sure. I don't think it was. I think he was already ahead of David May, but he has found a way through now into second. And now tried to set off after the leader. It's interesting actually, because I'm pretty sure Chrissy was being held up there, so maybe he can go that little bit quicker now. Needs to negotiate the traffic. Clive Brooks in there being lapped by Alex Miller, having just been lapped by Mark Thomas's Capri. see the way that Chrissy Palmer is getting away now. Goes up the inside of Clive Brooks, and there you've got to be committed though. Worst thing, if you're lapping someone, the worst thing you can do is be tentative about the overtake. You've got to treat it almost as if it's a pass for position, because otherwise the slower car doesn't know what you're doing, doesn't know where to go. If you kind of half-heartedly stick the nose up the inside, they might be tempted to close the door on you, but you need to execute a firm but clean pass. Again, something that a lot of these one-make drivers are maybe not that familiar with. So, racing in the Clubsport Trophy, for those of them who maybe want to go on to have a career in multi-class racing, racing in the Clubsport Trophy is a good way of learning how to deal with that lapped traffic and how to negotiate them with minimal time loss. About to head into the final 10 minutes or so then of this first round of the BRSCC ClubSport Trophy here at Cadwell Park. Third ever outing for the ClubSport Trophy, which has been so well supported right from the get-go. We had over 30 cars at both of the first two races in series history last year. We've had 38 entered this weekend, which I think will be about on a par probably with what we had at Donington Park. Oh my word, Alex Miller there was just about to set up a pass, I think, on the Capri, wasn't he, of Mark Thomas, and Chrissy Palmer had other ideas, sent the number 99 car up the inside, and now sets off after the Capri, which he could do with getting past as quickly as possible, but he doesn't have the grunt over the top of the mountain. But now he's going to get really held up through the Hall Bends. This hasn't worked out well for Chrissy Palmer. He really needed to try and get through a bit quicker than that. He now clears the Capri, but that's another second or so lost to Brian Chandler, assuming Chandler had a clean run through there. Look at the way they're all scrabbling for traction on the exit of the hairpin. So difficult to get the cars to accelerate cleanly away there, especially the Capri, which you would imagine has worked its tyres a little harder than some others around it. And again, look at this. So Chrissy Palmer is lapping the MR2 of David Thomas there, but David Thomas still has good straight line speed. These two cars both in the same class because the MR2 has the power advantage, but the MX-5 is better through the corners. Finally goes around the outside, and now also trying to execute that move is Mark Thomas on David Thomas's MR2. He goes through around the outside as well. David May now closing in as well to challenge. It's a job sometimes to know. Confusing me during this race, and I'm sure a lot of the drivers are getting confused as well as to who they're actually racing for position, who is lapping them, because especially with the pit stops thrown in the mix there, and most of these teams won't have pit-to-car radios, so it can be tricky actually to communicate to your driver whether or not they need to attack or defend from the cars around them. This is getting tight. Alex Miller there trying to get up the inside of David May, who's in the back of the MR2 there. David Thomas can't disappear though, he has to sit on the racing line through the gooseneck, and now David May gets up the inside. Can Alex Miller follow him? He's going to try, turns in, accelerates, they almost bang doors, and I think the MX-5 is going to come out on top this time. Yep, Miller goes through. So great dicing for position, well not for position necessarily, but for track position going on. Every car you have to pass is still an overtake, especially around a circuit like this one, where even if they want to, the back markers can't often simply get out of the way. Alex Miller now closing in on David May. It's a shame Miller had that moment at the mountain in the first part of the race, because had he not, he's clearly got the pace to fight for a podium here. He qualified for this race all the way down in 15th place, did the number 17 car. As finally into the pit lane comes David May, but as we saw earlier on, I'm pretty sure the pit lane window has closed and he's been waved into the penalty box by the marshals. So I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark here and say that he missed the pit lane window. Oh, in fact, we're getting also a notification of a penalty for car number 43, which is going to be applied. And that is for a short pit stop. So a couple of others getting themselves in a spot and bother. That's Andy Thompson at Toledo, which has been running well, and sadly is going to receive a penalty. No notification actually officially of what this penalty is for David May, but I'm fairly sure it's because he pitted out of sequence. Didn't make his mandatory pit stop when he should have done. So that takes him completely out of contention now, unfortunately. Good MX-5 battle here, the fairly highly modified number 37 example diving through on the inside there. into the wall bends. Still a Mark 1 MX-5 this, but you can see the extra horsepower, the extra aerodynamic bits that have sprouted on Scott Ferguson's Mark 1 MX-5 as he goes past the more standard version to put a lap on that one. The leader Chandler comes across the start-finish line towards Coppice Corner once again, hurls the Lotus Exige into the left-hander. Now this is Robert Greensmith, and right behind him, the car I was just saying has that penalty, the Seat Toledo, but critically behind both of them is Phil Adcock, who's being lapped here by Paul Sheard. So Adcock has lost that position to Robert Greensmith. Now we didn't see whether that happened in the pit stops or whether it's happened on track subsequently, but Phil will not be particularly impressed with that. He's going to try and use this traffic maybe to get back onto terms with the blue and white MX-5. So the blue and white MX-5 and the yellow BMW Compact we're talking about here. Greensmith ahead of Adcock now. And Phil Adcock will be looking to try and get that position within Class E back away. This is for, I think actually now third place in Class E, because I reckon Kevin Bird in the 59 MX-5 has got himself ahead of them now. Even so, they are fighting for class position and a position on the podium, which neither driver will want to give up without a fight. On board now with Craig Butterworth as he accelerates out of Mansfield Corner. Paul Sheard has Cameron McLean right on his tail. This is a fight for position then. For about 6th place they're running in right now. Oh, and around in front of them goes the Seat, and Paul Sheard does a really good job to avoid hitting him. And that was the 43 car of Andy Thompson, the Seat Toledo, that has gone around at the hairpin. Just lost the rear on the way in, I think, there. And now he's perched up on the curb in a very awkward spot. Does a good job to get back across the road. But as we saw when Brian Chandler had his moment down here earlier on, it's not the work of a moment necessarily to get going again. But here is Brian Chandler, speaking the devil, who puts another lap on the spinning Seat and tries to do the same now to Alex Bohm in the Ford Fiesta, who's chasing down the group of cars that we just saw racing now. That doesn't look good. That looked like smoke from the Lotus. Or was it just a bit of dust offline? Well, Brian Chandler will be very much keeping an eye on that, as will his team if they happen right in front of the start-finish line. Creates a bit of engine smoke. That's not good news. Good news here for Phil Adcock, though. He's back ahead of Robert Greensmith now. And this to-and-fro battle between the pair continues. So, given the fact that Phil's just been able to reel in the MX-5 pretty quickly, I'm going to guess that Robert got through at the pit stops, and Phil has been working hard to close back in again. Speaking of working hard, Chrissy Palmer is working the car pretty hard out of Charlie's corner there, still running in 2nd place in the Mark IV MX-5. Runs its way through Park Corner into the closing stages now of this BRSCC ClubSport Trophy race at Cadwell Park. Hurls the car down through the gooseneck. Truly spectacular piece of road that. The number 10 car about to go another lap down. That's Elliot Luthwaite, who I think I'm right in saying is the last car running at the moment, but relatively inexperienced driver is Elliot, so he'll be glad just to see the checkered flag in one piece, I think. So too at this stage, well, Brian Chandler, he may be dominating the race. He's over 20 seconds clear now, Chrissy Palmer, but he's not had things all his own way. Had that moment earlier on at the hairpin. He maybe had that just hint of smoke coming from the car last time around, but he does now go on to the final lap. There's no sign of the smoke anymore, so I'm hoping that that was just a flash in the pan sort of thing. Back with Alex Miller now, heading towards his least favourite part of the circuit, Mountain, where he lost control early on. Don't want anywhere near him though, so if you're going to enjoy Cadwell Park, this might be the best way to do so, with perfectly clear track, no one to attack, no one to defend. See just what an inviting ribbon of tarmac it is through the undulating hall bends. G-Force is working hard on our camera here as it starts to wobble to and fro. It's one of the few circuits, actually, I've spoken to a few racing drivers who say that it's the only place where they suffer from things like neck pain and a bit of motion sickness sometimes, just because of the constant rise and fall left and right. It is like a roller coaster. Every corner seems to have a hill right on the apex which you climb and then descend very rapidly. No one has been able to do it more rapidly than this man. Brian Chandler comes down towards the mountain for the final time, and he is about to take the victory in the 3rd ever BRSCC ClubSport Trophy race. We will have had 3 different race winners in 3 different cars as well. The MX-5 that won at Brands Hatch, the Honda Civic at Donington Park, and although Brian Chandler is known more for his MX-5 exploits. He is at the wheel of the Lotus Exige this time around. One of the fastest cars we've seen racing in the Clubsport Trophy. Actually, he's not quite going to put a lap on Adcock and Greensmith, is he, though? So they're going to have another lap to debate that third place in Class E. But Brian Chandler, gets on the grass coming out of the final corner. Is he going to put a lap on them? He might split them, actually, as they come towards the checkered flag. No, not quite. The checkered flag does wave, though, for Brian Chandler, and he wins the first round of the 2020 BRSCC ClubSport Trophy. Second place goes to Chrissy Palmer. Third for Ollie Samways. He got back on the podium. Brilliant drive that for the Toyota driver. Declan Lee and David May round out the top 5 ahead of Cameron McLean, Paul Sheehan, Alex Boehm, Adrian Burge and Mark Thomas. Now, further back, Robert Greensmith there comes home third in Class E, but there is no sign of Phil Adcock. Phil Adcock has disappeared on the final lap of the race and will not get to the flag. And in the CityCar Cup, it's Nick Grindrod that takes the victory by 17.9 seconds in the end over Richard Brunning. A great debut, though, for that very exciting new class. Well, a fantastic race here from Cadwell Park. Thoroughly enjoyed that. A great mix of cars. And the BRSCC have really stumbled upon something very promising here, I think, with the Clubsport Trophy. I say stumbled upon it. A lot of hard work has gone into this, and it's great to see them already reaping the rewards.
Brian, fantastic win in the Clubsport Trophy. That is a fantastic car.
Yeah, we acquired it over COVID. So yeah, it's the first time it's been out in anger. To be fair, it's the first time it's done 45 minutes in one stint. So perhaps you're on the right road. Yeah, more to come, hopefully.
More to come? I mean, that was a victory. How can you get better than that?
I wanted to be kind of like sub 40s. I was pushing and pushing, but yeah, I could only do a 40. I wanted to see a 39. That's what I was aiming for. So yeah, more to come. Okay, well, we'll be interested to see what happens next time out. But you've won the trophy. That's a nice little bit of silverware. Yeah, that'll do. That'll add to him.
Brilliant. Brian, as always, great to speak to you. And
yeah, you too.
Good luck. See you next time out.
See you later. Bye bye.